I'm not doing this dance again, Zach Ertz. You got the rose in your mouth. The tango music's playing. I've fallen for those big baby blue Zach Ertz eyes one too many times. It's not happening this year. All right. You're an athlete. You just can't get your shit together. I want no part of you. Stop calling me.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host for tonight. My name's Nick Walsh. And I'm sitting here with my lovely and talented co-host, Matt Rogers. What's going on, Rogers?
Not much, Walsh. What's going on with you? I did my first mock draft today, and it was pretty confusing. Yeah, first mock draft of the year.
Confusing seems like the right word for it. That's definitely how I feel about a lot of ADPs currently, and I'm sure throwing that all into practice was probably a little overwhelming. I have not yet started mock drafts. I did, however, this week start my first MFL 10, which is like the long draft best ball league type stuff. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try and do a bunch of those this off season, but we'll figure it out.
Nice.
So for those of you guys, wow. All right. So for those of you guys at home listening to this, you may hear us react similar to how I just did throughout the podcast, because we both have the Mets game on. They're playing the Cubs, and it's important to us because we're currently very sad about the Mets, and we want to be less sad. So if you do hear a reaction, that's probably it. But anyway, guys, this podcast is sponsored by NoHalftime.com. The NoHalftime app isn't your typical fantasy sports service. You get to create one-on-one fantasy matchups, and you can use the code LTFF for a free sign-up bonus. So, guys, we're going to cover the other two teams that in the NFC East that Vinny, Shrek, and Don did not cover the other day. So that would be, for those of you keeping track on your scorecards at home, the Washington Redskins and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think this will be interesting, Rogers. I think the Redskins are super interesting. The Eagles, not as much. But what's your general opinion of these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Shrek coordinates the podcast schedule and gave us the bottom of the barrel in the NFC East. I really wish we could have talked about one of those two other teams instead of these. But like you said, there is something to be said for these teams. A lot of new stuff going on here. So it's interesting. We'll get to it.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I would like to mention that there will be an interview with Bruce from our sponsor, NoHalftime.com, at the end. That'll be Shrek doing that. So they'll be talking a little bit of Giants and Cowboys, just a little bit extra from the other day, and then also some daily fantasy. So keep an eye out for that once Rogers and I are done. So I guess without further ado, let's get into the Redskins, dude. Let's get into Kirk. There aren't any changes in the coaching staff here. Oh, you know what? Actually, hold on one second. We'll get into Kirk in 1 second because I just wanted to say two things regarding the Tuesday podcast. One, we had both of the Alfred Morris apologists on the Cowboys podcast. What's up with that? They were talking up Alfred Morris like he could be a legitimate thing this year. Alfred Morris will not be a legitimate thing this year. Anyway.
I'm very glad you said that because I was thinking it and gritting my teeth the entire time listening to it. Vinny just like, Alfred Morris is good value in that one spot wherever he's being drafted. And also, by the way, I think I'm going to just slowly take shots at Shrek every podcast opener until he confronts me in person.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. That sounds like a good plan.
He's such a pacifist. I just want to wait till he says something.
There we go. The other thing I did want to say about the podcast on Tuesday is that I love Sterling Shepard this year. I know they were kind of cautiously optimistic. I just want to get it out in the open right now for everyone to hear. Love the guy. Rogers, you got any thoughts on the Cowboys or Giants that we can go through real quick before we hop into Kirk?
Not really. I thought they did a really good job of analyzing that backfield, with the exception of some Alfred Morris love. I thought Lance Dunbar should have gotten a little more love, because I know you're a Lance Dunbar fan as well, especially in those PPR formats. But I think they were pretty spot on in most of their analysis there.
Yeah, agreed. Definitely agreed. So now that we got that out of the way, now that I remembered to throw that in there, let's get into Kirk Cousins, dude. Here he is going, and just for reference, any ADPs that we use in this podcast are going to be from Fantasy Football Calculator in a 12-team PPR draft. Kirk Cousins, 11th pick of the 10th round, quarterback 15. What's your general thoughts on him, and then what do you think of that price?
I absolutely hate that price. I'll say it right now. Quarterback 15 is like okay, but in the 10th round, first off, I'm not sure why quarterbacks are going at such a, like that mid-tier, like 10 to 15, going from like 8 rounds to 8 to 10. I think quarterbacks really deep this year. Maybe that's why people are trying to snag up those streamable matchup-based guys. But Kirk Cousins last year only had 2 multiple touchdown games before Week 14, and that's pretty much all of the fantasy regular season. He did have 6 games where he had over 40 attempts, so like he slings the ball, and like Jay Gruden's fine with that. But I think that wide receiver core is going to take like a slight step back this year. And I guess Kirk Cousins is still technically in a contract year, but without those last 3 weeks where he threw 11 touchdowns and no interceptions, he was looking at like an 18-11 year. And to me, that's nothing better than like the occasional matchup-based streamer. What are your thoughts?
That's definitely some fair points. I think I'm pretty in on Cousins this year, though. I know he did have those big games towards the end of the year, and that did play a large part. He also had 5 rushing touchdowns last year, which is unlikely to happen again, or unlikely that he'll reproduce that sort of number in terms of rushing touchdowns. But he was actually really efficient. He was 8th in the NFL in adjusted yards per attempt, which is kind of, I guess, like an in vogue stat in terms of measuring quarterback and receiver efficiency. He was also 6th in the NFL in QBR. Another thing that does kind of worry me a little bit is that Washington was 30th in the NFL in offensive pace of play. But yeah, I think Cousins, he was very efficient last year, besides the fact that he, slung it. And I actually like this wide receiving. I think their wide receiver core has a lot of really nice pieces that can fit in really well together. So I like Cousins. He's going to be higher than my quarterback 15 in my rankings, and I don't mind him at that price either.
Okay, and I think you're right. I should also factor Jordan Reed, who we'll get to in a little bit, into the conversation in that passing game. But I could totally see that happening. I just don't think I would ever be willing to take Kirk Cousins. I don't think I'd be willing to draft Kirk Cousins, I would say, unless he was my quarterback too.
Okay, that's fair. That's definitely fair. So let's move on to the running back position, which is interesting to say it nicely, I guess. We've got Matt Jones, who seems like the clear-cut running back number 1 here, who's currently going 2nd pick in the 5th round. Again, this is in 12-team leagues. Running back 21 overall. We've got Chris Thompson, who's really a pass-catching specialist. He doesn't run well out of the backfield, and he doesn't particularly pass block well, but he's great at catching the ball out of the backfield. He's currently going mid-14th round, running back 67. They also did draft Keith Marshall in the 7th round. He's notable because he's an athletic freak. He ran a 4.3 140, was really great in his freshman year of college before tearing his ACL and then kind of getting buried on the depth chart behind the Georgia running backs, like Todd Gurley and Nick Chubb. So it's an interesting little situation. And I guess we'll start with Matt Jones because he does appear to be the starter. What are your thoughts on him here?
I mean, again, in that like 15 to 25 running back pool, there's a lot of mystery. I think he's going like right before DeMarco Murray's and like Jeremy Hills and guys like that. Based off the opportunity, I don't hate it. I mean, Matt Jones had some good games last year that, won his owner's weeks. It's obviously his backfield to lose. Chris Thompson's more that third down back sort of thing, but he will be in the mix. Early fifth round pick. I don't hate it as long as Matt Jones is not my running back one. Like if there's a team being constructed where, you take Gronk early or something and go a wide receiver heavy or a stud quarterback, I would not want to back myself into a corner where Matt Jones is the first running back that I take. I think you could probably find someone more reliable in that range. But if this is your running back 2 around there, it could totally pay off. He's got some high upside, and they had some running success last year, so I don't completely hate it. What about you?
Yeah, I'm very conflicted on it because on one hand, like you say, the opportunity is 100% there. The organization has repeatedly praised him throughout the offseason, said that he's their guy. Even, they didn't bring in anyone else to really challenge him outside of Keith Marshall and an undrafted rookie, what's his name, Robert Kelly out of Tulane. So, they seem to have a lot of confidence in him. That being said, Washington's bringing back basically the same offensive line that was ranked 21st in run blocking by Football Outsiders in 2015. Matt Jones last year only averaged 3.4 yards per carry. He ranked 66 out of 69 qualifying running backs by Pro Football Focus's rankings last year. And he was dead last among 44 qualifying running backs in Football Outsiders' defense adjusted yards above replacement last year, which is sort of an efficiency stat that tries to adjust for the strengths of the defense that a running back faces. So the organization seems to think that he's great and is willing to give him an opportunity. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, you just blew my goddamn mind.
What?
All that was just very, very, very technical stats. Those were all great stats. Just blew my mind, all of it. All very interesting. All the pro football stuff on Matt Jones. I was just listening to it like, whoa, my analysis needs to step up a lot.
Well, basically, like it's a whole bunch of jargon to basically say the organization thinks he's really good, and last year he was really bad. So it's like it's one of those things where like either the organization, either he continues being bad and the organization is wrong, and potentially they wise up and give the job to someone else, or the organization knows more than we do and he's actually pretty good, and last year was a bit of an aberration, him just getting adjusted to the NFL. I don't know, but it seems like for the beginning of the year, they're going to give him a lot of usage.
Yeah, when is the Redskins organization known more than anyone else, really, though? No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, right. We got Dan Schneider over here, the guy who's in a public battle about the team name change and won't acknowledge anything. And he thinks Matt Jones is great. Yeah. But yeah, I think all of that is to say it's a roundabout way of getting to the point that I think based on his opportunity alone, he's worth it at that point, but I don't expect much in terms of his actual production.
Okay, I like it.
All right, let's move on to Chris Thompson and Keith Marshall, or anyone else you want to talk about in this backfield. Thompson in the mid 14th. Does that do anything for you?
I think strictly in PPR formats, it's just as good of a flyer as like a Bilal Powell, like a running back 6 to round out your bench. He could certainly. I mean, there's not much competition in this backfield that we see. Keith Marshall had, like you said, a very injury-prone career at Georgia, and that's where you went, right? Georgia?
Yeah.
And Chris, so Chris Thompson could totally be one of those bye-week starts. Not a bad guy to own at all, and probably a pretty good Matt Jones handcuff, or Redskins running back handcuff, I guess you could call it. I don't know.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think you can do worse in terms of flyers. I just don't think he has the upside as much as some other guys maybe in that range. One guy who we may talk about a little bit later, that's what we call it. A team.
One spot ahead of him.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's Chris Thompson. He's a one-trick pony in terms of pass catching, and then like we said, Keith Marshall and a couple other guys are back there, but likely won't do anything this year. Let's talk about some wide receivers. Deshaun is the place to start, I guess. Only played in 9 games last year. Obviously a down year for him because of that. currently going as wide receiver 37, beginning of the 8th round. Does that seem low to you? Because it seems low to me.
No, I mean, not really. I think that's a product of the fact that a lot of people are starting to look at Deshaun Jackson and like the forever storyline of his career being so boom or bust. And I think people are starting to see a little more bust than boom, especially because his ceiling, I feel like, over the past couple of years has slowly started to come down. I mean, in those 9 games you talked about, I think he only had 30 catches, and that's not good, even for a guy that's known for breaking long touchdowns. So I think it comes more from guys realizing, I don't know if I can ever trust this guy to put him in my lineup unless I'm desperate on the buys or, for whatever other reason, because you can never feel confident about it going in.
Yeah, that's very fair. He's he's either a week winner or a week loser for you. He's never a guy who's maybe gonna do his part for your team, give you like the 10 points or whatever that you need. He's either gonna blow up or he's gonna not do anything. But I think if my team is structured heavily around wide receivers before that, I'm okay with like him and like the flex maybe being that guy where he, if I have good enough wide receivers, he kind of can put you over the edge some weeks. And if he doesn't do well, it's not a huge detriment based on the rest of your team. It's difficult though. Would you take him at that price or would you not want him there?
I think so. I think there may be some more upside guys or, some younger guys, like I'm sure we'll talk about. Not that I would take him at this price, but like Josh Doxson, at least you can say, oh, well, he could have a breakout year and become this team's 2 or something. I feel like there's just guys that have something a little less established. I mean, Deshaun's role in this offense is established, and that's something you can lean on, but how question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you there. I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's move on to Pierre Garçon, who I guess is the next guy on the depth chart. Last year, he saw 111 targets, got 72 catches, 777 yards, 6 touchdowns, but only saw double-digit targets in 2 games, no 100-yard wide receiving games. Didn't really turn the needle much in fantasy. What's your opinion of him this year?
No. That is my opinion of Pierre Garçon. Just no. And I would also like to say, screw you, Walsh, for me always loving Pierre Garçon in the years that he sucked. And then when I finally learned my lesson, then you start to like him, and he's serviceable as a fantasy option and has like the better year of his last 3 years. So that's just something I should just get used to after playing fantasy with you for so long. But to me, this year, Pierre Garçon is a no-go. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. When he was great, like back in, I guess it was 2013 or that sort of thing, he had 181 targets. That's why he was an elite fantasy option. I'd be surprised if he breaks 100 targets this year with some of the other guys, the young receivers on the team, potentially taking a bit of a role in this passing offense. So yeah, he's currently going at the back end of the 13th round. We know what Pierre Garçon is, and he's not a guy who's going to win you fantasy football games. So let's talk about Josh Doxson. Exciting rookie. He's a little bit older than most prospects. He'll be turning 24 during the 2016 season. What's your opinion here? Do you have much of a grasp on Josh Doxson? I know a lot of the time rookies are difficult to project for everyone.
Yeah, it is kind of difficult to project, and I'll bank off your point with Pierre Garçon that I don't think any wide receiver on this team is going to touch 90 targets. Even if Josh Doxson is a serviceable rookie, I think the bulk of it will go to Jordan Reed. Maybe close, I should say 100. I don't really think. I think it's going to be spread around a lot through the air. Jordan Reed is going to be the focal point, and just because of the mystery surrounding a rookie wide receiver, that would be cool. Some
yeah, really
Josh
cool.
Chewbacca going on. But yeah, right. But I just, at that price of the 14th round, maybe just for the upside, and there could be a guy that could sort of break out as the guy for Kirk Cousins in this receiving core, but I'm just not optimistic about it.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Josh Doxson for me is a guy that you may want on your team around week 8, but you won't want on your team around week 1, just because he's I see him like kind of moving similar to like the way DGB got used last year, where it wasn't used much at first, was kind of a red zone, like brought in for red zone packages, because Doxson is this guy. He's 6'4". He's an explosive athlete, led wide receivers at the combine in vertical jump, broad jump, short shuttle. But he's not going to take Pierre Garçon's job right away. And none of these guys are going to usurp Jamison Crowder's job in the slot, who we'll talk about next. But he's the guy who'll be used in the red zone packages a lot. Oh, thank you. Yeah. He's a guy who'll be used in the red zone a lot early, and then I wouldn't be surprised to see his snap percentage slowly creep up throughout the year, to the point where he's eventually being used pretty frequently by the time the season ends.
I totally agree with that. To me, not really too draftable, but
yeah. I think he'll be a waiver wire ad like midway through the season for some teams. So I guess let's talk about Jamison Crowder, who's the other receiver there. He was a slot specialist last year, saw 78 targets. Do you have any interest here? He's not getting drafted this year.
Yeah, not really. Just a note on Jamison Crowder that he recently, a few weeks ago, said that the Washington Redskins have the best wide receiver core in the NFL. And I just want to take a second to laugh at that and then just be the first to say maybe there should be some drug testing going on in that locker room. Look for the next pot suspension to be maybe Jamison Crowder. I'm not sure. But, he could be a guy, again, barring – maybe with an injury, some daily situations, he could have some value. I don't think he should be open, though.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. Not a guy who can be drafted and owned. Any big games he's very unlikely to repeat unless there are injuries there. All right, on to the meat, or I guess like the highest drafted guy for this team, Jordan Reed, obviously the tight end. Going currently at the second pick in the 4th round, second tight end overall behind Gronk. You digging him there?
I mean, I've been burned by tight ends early so much in the past, and my own personal bias aside, it's a high pick for a very injury-prone guy. I mean, the guy had 11 touchdowns last year in fewer games. I think 9 games he played last year, right?
He played 14, but he was
started 9.
Limited. He was limited in a lot of games.
Right, he started 9 games, and you just want him to stay healthy the whole time. But he also had a lot of situations last year. It was questionable going into Friday or Saturday, things like that. And I'm just so hesitant to bite in the 4th round on a guy that has yet to play a full season. I really like him, and I don't disagree with tight end 2. But that's just a hefty price to pay for someone that could be like a Eric Decker or Sammy Watkins, depending on where they go. Maybe a little lower than that, but
yeah, I completely agree with you. I will not be drafting Jordan Reed at the beginning of the 4th round because he has a significant injury history in terms of both lower body injuries as well as concussions. And concussions are scary because if a guy has those sorts of things compound, I mean, they're scary in a real life sense and they're scary in terms of fantasy potential because one concussion could knock this guy out for the rest of the season, potentially the rest of his career, which is just not something. He's great. And if you have him on your team and he is healthy, you're going to be very happy you do. But as you said, he's never played a full season. And he spent a lot of time in that kind of middle ground where it's is he going to play? Is he not going to play? If he does play, is he going to work out this week? There were weeks where he would have a couple targets, but he caught 1 or 2 touchdowns, so he ended up working out. But that's something that's hard to bank on. Love Jordan Reed. I think he's great. I don't think I can draft him at that price. So yeah. The other guy.
The only thing I'll say. Oh, sorry. I was going to say the only thing about Jordan Reed to be a bit like devil's advocate, I guess, is that this is the first year probably where he will literally be the number one by far option in that offense with an established quarterback now. So that's interesting, and I'm sure that's tempting people. But again, back to what we said,
Yeah, absolutely. And similarly, he's going to be a guy I use all the time and daily, and I'll be willing to pay up for him if he's healthy going into it, because he is going to be the number one option in that offense and the number one red zone option. But I can't pay for that in season long. I just want to bring up Niles Paul as a guy who I really liked in the past. I thought he was very good, former college wide receiver. He's the backup tight end on that team now. Very dynamic in 2014, and he broke his ankle and missed the entire 2015 season. He's back. So similarly to what we said, Jordan Reed does have a long injury history, and there's a long list of guys behind him, starting with Niles Paul and then continuing on to Vernon Davis and Logan Paulson, who probably won't be relevant, who will be able to come in and supplant Jordan Reed in that offense. So just keep an eye on him as a waiver guy if Reed is hurt.
Also, am I wrong in saying that Niles Paul, maybe Logan Paulson aside, is the playmaker on the offense that's been with the Redskins the longest as of right now?
Who is this?
Niles Paul?
Potentially. He's been with them. I want to say this is like his fourth or fifth year. But he wasn't used heavily his first couple of years. I'm not sure.
True.
But yeah. Did we have anything else here on the Redskins, Rogers, or does that do it?
No, I didn't really have anything. I don't think their defense will be fantasy worthy. That's about it.
All right, cool. Yeah, me either. So we're going to take a quick break and hear from our sponsors, No Halftime, and then Rogers and I will be back to talk about the Eagles, followed by that interview with Bruce from No Halftime. So enjoy, guys.
You're staring at your weekly fantasy opponent and thinking to yourself, I would love to challenge just one of his players, not his entire team. But your fantasy sports service doesn't allow you to. Now you can on the all-new No Halftime app. The No Halftime app allows you to create individual challenges using players or teams. For example, you could pit Beckham versus Brown, Cam versus Rodgers, or even Ezekiel Elliott versus AP. Creating a challenge takes seconds, and accepting challenges is even easier. No Halftime challenges can be private or public and created for the NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL, PGA, and other sports. Join today and get started. Real money and fantasy supremacy awaits you. And now you can also try No Halftime for free with $0 challenges. Visit NoHalftime.com for more information and to download the No Halftime app for your iPhone or Android device. Receive a bonus by entering in the promo code LTFF at sign-up. Receive a free t-shirt when you make a deposit. No Halftime, where the fantasy sports season never takes a break.
All right, well, welcome back. Again, that was from our sponsor, NoHalftime.com. Definitely go ahead and check out their app. It's a lot of fun. And Rogers, let's get right into the Eagles and start by saying that Doug Peterson is the new head coach. What does that mean for you? Because I know it means some things for me, and I want to kind of hear what you have to say on the situation as well.
Well, some interesting notes for Doug Peterson. He was actually a terrible quarterback, but a quarterback for the Eagles, and was benched for rookie Donovan McNabb. I read earlier in the week. I thought was interesting, and he's been under Andy Reid for a long time. He obviously came over from the Chiefs, and it's really rare to see a quarterback in the NFL as a player be a very run-heavy guy. We know Andy Reid as a coach. I'm saying we know Andy Reid called the plays in Kansas City, but obviously he was their offensive coordinator, and we saw. We'll get into the running backs, but we saw a lot of different guys have a lot of success in that Chiefs backfield, and I'm not sure exactly what it means yet because I'm scared and insecure about my opinions, but I think it's definitely intriguing. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it means a lot in terms of the Eagles' fantasy production because Kansas City was the 31st in the NFL in offensive pace last year. So that's huge because the Eagles were one of the fastest paced teams in the league. So just right off the bat, we're getting significantly fewer offensive plays for all of the Eagles fantasy options, which means fewer opportunities to score fantasy points. As well, he was a lot more run heavy. The Chiefs threw, I have it written down somewhere. Where do I have it? The Chiefs passed the ball 473 times. They had 473 pass attempts in 2015. The Eagles had 623 pass attempts in 2015. Some of that is game script, and some of that is the fact that the Eagles were playing from behind and in garbage time a lot. But a lot of that is just the idea that Doug Peterson is going to slow the ball down, most likely, and not pass the ball as much. That's big for fantasy purposes. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about the quarterbacks. Sam Bradford is I guess, the nominal starter at this point. Carson Wentz is also waiting in the wing, the rookie number 2 overall pick. And then Chase Daniel is there, but I'm sure Chase Daniel just wants to hold the clipboard and get paid a lot of money, as he has done for his entire career. Sam Bradford, any interest? He's not getting drafted right now.
No, yeah, I have no interest in Sam Bradford whatsoever. Another guy that, if he even stays healthy, might not have the job all year. So
yeah,
I don't think I'm sure he'll work into that streamer conversation, but I'd rather have guys in the low 20s like Brock Osweiler and things like that over him. So no to Sam Bradford. Yeah. I can't believe how much that guy has not lived up to his potential.
It's insane. He's gotten paid so much money to be not good for a really long time. Not good or hurt. But anyway, yeah, I'm with you on that. No to Sam Bradford. As I said, the pace is scary. Last year he was an option sometimes because of the pace of play. That won't be the case this year. I will mention that if Carson Wentz does get the job at some time this year, he's very good at running the ball, which may make him at least mildly intriguing in fantasy. But if they announce that he's starting, don't go run to your waiver wire and pick up Carson Wentz. Other than that,
yeah, no.
Let's move on to running back, because this is probably the more interesting spot here. We'll start with Ryan Matthews, who is currently going 12th pick in the 5th round, running back 25 overall. This is another one to me where that seems cheap. I think I like Ryan Matthews there.
I think that's very cheap. I would actually be willing to take him over Matt Jones. I think Ryan Matthews, I don't want to say he'll have a breakout year, because that's just two things that shouldn't go in a sentence together, Ryan Matthews and breakout. But I think that Doug Peterson may stand there and be like, this is a guy that was drafted in the 1st round. Or was it the 2nd round? Early 2nd round.
Nope,
sorry,
1st round.
Ryan Matthews. Yeah, 1st round. That's what I thought. And I think he's just going to be like, this guy has not been a lead back in quite some time. I think he gets over 200 carries and close to 1,200 to 1,300 overall yards. He's not going to be a touchdown guy. But in the time that DeMarco missed last year, Ryan Matthews did pretty well and was pretty effective with not ever a crazy workload, minus that one game, I believe it was versus the Jets. I may be wrong there. But I think Ryan Matthews has earned the chance to get 17, 18 carries a game for a little bit of a stretch, and I think Doug Peterson, figuring out this Eagles offense, could be willing to do it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Peterson's offense has historically featured the running back in both the run game and the pass game. Ryan Matthews, when healthy and when starting, has always been efficient. He just hasn't stayed healthy and hasn't gotten heavy usage. Last year, he was 9th in defensive yards above replacement, that stat that I threw out before. That's very efficient in terms of running backs. And he's shown that he can be a pass catching back in the past. In 2011, he caught 50 passes, which is a lot for a running back. So he's not a guy who needs to be taken off the field in passing down situations. I think if he gets 200 touches in 2015, which he had in 2016, this coming year, if he gets 200 touches, which he had about 127 in 2015, he's probably going to return value. And that's total touches. That's not even carries. I think he's likely to get more. So yeah, I very much like Ryan Matthews where he's going. Anything else on him, or should we move on to Sproles?
Definitely. You think he's? Yeah, I want to ask you, what do you think Ryan Matthews is like a potential? Would you be cool with him as your running back one?
Yeah, if I'm going to go wide receiver heavy, say take 3 wide receivers right off the bat, or maybe I get Gronk in the first or early second or that kind of thing. I'll take Ryan Matthews in the 4th round. I think that's something that I could definitely do.
Yeah, I think he's sort of the polar opposite of my example with Matt Jones. How they're both kind of in the same range. Matt Jones a little bit higher, but they're interchangeable in that running back range. And I think while Matt Jones, I said I would not be willing to lean on him that much. Ryan Matthews, if handcuffed, which we'll get to in a little bit, Ryan Matthews, I could be cool with him as my number one, especially in PPR formats, which is probably where you're going so wide receiver heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very good call. That's a very good call. Let's move on to Darren Sproles, who's currently going 8th pick in the 11th round, running back 48. Darren Sproles is, we know what he is. He's also 32 years old and is going to be 33 years old during this season. He was still PPR running back 28 last year in that timeshare. But what do you think here? Is he worth a pick?
I think he's worth a pick. I still think that price might be too high for me either way. We haven't really seen Doug Peterson, while he has, fed a lot of mouths as far as, backfield in Kansas City and things like that. That's a weird way to put that. Fed a lot of mouths. I'm not going to but like you said, he's on the wrong side of 30, as you said. And I'm not sure what his role is. He's always been that special teamer. I don't know what Doug Peterson will be willing to give him carry-wise. And I think there's too much mystery, and the age is a factor that I'm not digging it. I don't think I'll own him. You never want to start.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say that last year he did average over 6 targets per game in the Eagles' losses and only about 3.5 per game in their wins. So there might be something to the idea that if you think the Eagles are going to lose, he might be worth something. But that's difficult to predict, and I don't want to rely on that. So let's move on to Wendell Smallwood, who's the 5th round rookie out of West Virginia. This is your boy. This is Roger's boy. He talked him up on our draft podcast, I guess a couple months ago now. He led the Big 12 in rushing in 2015. Tell me about Wendell Smallwood. Tell me what you think. He's currently going mid-14th round, running back 66.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if Wendell Smallwood listens to this podcast, which is so incredibly unlikely. He's probably like, oh, shit, why did Matt pick for me to do well and call it so early? He's cursed my career, because that's what tends to happen to my high sleeper picks. But in all seriousness, Wendell Smallwood, the scouting report on him is that he's not going to be a 3-down back. They don't think he's ready to do that. But he's a 5'11", I think 212-pound guy, ran for over 1,500 yards last year at West Virginia, who led the Big 12. He's not great at pass blocking, but he's a good receiving back. The big knock on him is his pass blocking abilities, and he didn't really have much experience with that, always being handed the ball, I guess, at West Virginia. But with Ryan Matthews, while we like Ryan Matthews, I feel like that sort of trickles down to Wendell Smallwood, because if we're talking about injury-prone guys, Ryan Matthews is right up there with the best of them. So if Ryan Matthews were to go down, and Wendell Smallwood is looking to be that running back 2 hybrid with Darren Sproles in this offense, it's not like Darren Sproles is going to be getting the bulk of the work. So I think Wendell Smallwood is a great, especially if you're taking Ryan Matthews in the 5th round, a great handcuff in the 13th, 14th. I think he has a lot of upside. He's got good speed, good agility. He accelerates through gaps. Well, people love how he could translate to the NFL. So I think the opportunity that we want that we like, I should say, for Ryan Matthews sort of falls down to Wendell Smallwood, who will prove how not small his wood really is this season.
There it is. There's the Smallwood pun we've all been waiting for. The analysis and the breakdown there was great, but man, I was waiting on that Smallwood pun the whole time. I was just praying it was going to come, and it did. The Smallwood came. Sorry.
And one thing I'll say too, the Smallwood came. The Smallwood game should be put on a plaque somewhere, like in college dorm rooms for insecure kids. But in all seriousness, too, if Wendell Smallwood blows up, I was definitely the engineer of that trade for damn sure. I was first on Smallwood.
Yeah, no, 100%.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think if Matthews gets hurt, which everyone is saying is likely, then if you believe that Ryan Matthews is injury prone, then Wendell Smallwood becomes a great late round flyer. So yeah, I'm about it. Let's move on from Wendell Smallwood, as much as it pains us to do so. And talk about the wide receivers here, starting with Jordan Matthews. So the big question here is he going to play outside when the Eagles go to 2 wide receiver sets? He's always been a slot receiver, which hasn't mattered in the past couple of years because Chip Kelly constantly plays with 3 wide receivers. However, Doug Peterson does not constantly play with 3 wide receivers. They've tried to experiment with putting Jordan Matthews outside, and apparently it has not gone well. They don't like what they see out of him. But you would think he's got to be better than the relative trash that they have on the outside currently. So it's one of those things where we need to see early, is he going to stay in the game when they move to 2 wide receiver sets? Because if he's not, he's way overpriced. If he is, I think he's still a little overpriced, but not nearly as much so. What's your opinion here, Rogers?
Yeah, that's a great point. I have one thing written down for Jordan Matthews in my scurry of notes, and it's just rock hands in all caps. Because watching and owning that guy last year was just so frustrating. He had so many drops, but he's probably the most athletically gifted guy in that offense, apart from possibly Darren Sproles. But he's older. To your point, I mean, Doug Peterson came from the Chiefs, right? And we're talking about 2 wide receiver sets. I can't remember the last time. Well, I guess last year with Jeremy Maclin. But I can't really remember many times where the Chiefs had 1 good wide receiver on their team in fantasy. But, people always talk about Sam Bradford loving to throw the ball short, and Jordan Matthews, loves to run those routes in the flat and those crossing routes. But again, like you said, those are always from the slot, and those routes are more effective from the slot. I think Jordan Matthews is definitely athletic enough to go to the outside and definitely be effective against, the NFC East secondaries, which are not too intimidating. And, some of them are, but that's another conversation. But, I think his positioning and how he's used is very, very indicative of his fantasy success and his football success. He's got to translate to that role, and they need to do that to optimize his skill set.
Yeah, 100%. It's and I don't know if we did mention it earlier, but he's going 4th pick in the 5th round right now, wide receiver 26.
That's crazy.
Again,
that's crazy.
Yeah. The thing too is last year his raw numbers ended up like pretty decent. He had 85 catches on 126 targets, 997 yards, and 8 touchdowns, which it is not that bad, but a lot of it was garbage time, which is fine, but also not ideal. And then a lot of it came late, after it didn't really matter if you had already drafted him, Right.
That's what I was going to say to your point before. If you need to see this early, was that the thing with Jordan Matthews last year was you only got the payoff if you stubbornly stuck with him way too long. Those games that he had good, you should not have really been starting him. And I know because I started him and should not have been starting him. But to your point, if you're not seeing it, in the first week or two, you're going into the season with this guy as your wide receiver 2 or 3. That's crazy to me. And you got to see it early, and you should not stick with it 1 or 2 weeks straight of no production. I think it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. And just as, a general thing, I pointed out before the disparity between the Eagles' pass attempts and the Chiefs' pass attempts last year. Jordan Matthews made his hay on volume, 126 targets. Is he going to get to that target amount this year? Probably not. So just keep that in mind. Let's move on to the rest of this cadre of fellows, I guess. Nelson Aguilar was very bad last year, did not look good in his offseason workouts, and is currently being investigated for sexual assault. I don't think I'm going to draft him.
No.
Yeah, he somehow is still being drafted. He's being drafted in the middle of the 13th round. Stop doing that. He was awful last year. He was dead last in Pro Football Focus's wide receiver rankings. That's 121 out of 121 qualifying wide receivers. Don't draft him. Ruben Randle. Targets, catches, and his yardage last year were actually down from 2014, but he had a career-high 8 touchdowns. That kind of made it seem like he did well last year. I don't think – if he couldn't succeed with the high-volume Giants passing attack and Eli Manning there, is he going to be able to do it here?
Probably not. That's a good point, too. And a question I want to ask you about Nelson Aguilar. Would you take Ruben Randle, Jamison Crowder, and Ryan Grant of the Washington Redskins over Nelson Aguilar? Because I think at this point I would take all 3 of those guys. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the guys that you asked because I was looking at the Mets just winning. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, the Mets just got a really clutch save, and it was awesome. But I realized that you did not hear me.
It was really sweet. I wasn't paying attention at all.
It's such a lame-ass question to repeat, but I will because I'm curious. When Nelson Aguilar is getting drafted in the 13th round, wide receiver 58, as you said, I think, and tell me if you agree or disagree, I would rather draft Ruben Randle on the same team not being drafted, Jamison Crowder on the Washington Redskins, and Ryan Grant from the Redskins, both not getting drafted right now.
I don't know if I'd go as far as Jamison Crowder and Ryan Grant. Ruben Randle, 100% for me. I would rather take that risk on Rube than Nelson Aguilar. Crowder, I just don't think has the upside. I just can't think of it.
That's true. The upside is the only thing, though, because at least the way I look at it is Nelson Aguilar has not given anybody any reason to think that he can do literally anything. I can't remember one game last year where I'm like, there's that Nelson Aguilar hype, like even if it's just a blip on the radar. It's like Jamison Crowder and Ryan Grant at least had some like good games, I feel like. I mean, I could be wrong. I just didn't really pay attention, but I just saw nothing from this dude to warrant any draft position whatsoever.
Yeah, no, he was absolutely terrible. You are making a very good point in terms of that. He was awful last year. So outside of Ruben Randle, they have Chris Gibbons. He's a speedster. He's not going to do anything this year. Josh Huff hasn't really given us a reason to believe that he can be an every down receiver. I'm assuming we're staying away, right?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Let's close out with Zach Ertz. Hit me with your Zach Ertz take, baby.
I'm not doing this dance again, Zach Ertz. You got the rose in your mouth. The tango music's playing. I've fallen for those big baby blue Zach Ertz eyes one too many times. It's not happening this year. All right? You're an athlete. You just can't get your shit together. I want no part of you. Stop calling me.
Wow. Okay. Fair enough. I know you have been burned by the Ertz before. You've been irked by the Ertz, so to speak. Sorry, that was not good.
Nice.
But we're gonna. I hate to say it, but I've always been down on Ertz, and I'm kind of coming around on him a little bit. He really seemed like he.
Here comes his breakout year. Here comes his breakout year. Damn it! You did it to me again.
All right, so Ertz towards the end of last year, he finished the year with 4 straight games with 14 or more PPR points. His final stat line was 75 catches on 112 targets, 853 yards, 2 touchdowns, which made him PPR tight end 9. And theoretically, he should be a good red zone target at his size and position. So I think that touchdown number has a lot of room to grow. Even though he's never really been a prolific touchdown guy in the NFL, I think there is a shot that he has the potential to be, a 6+ touchdown type guy as a tight end. Last year he kind of did overtake Brent Selleck finally with getting 68.2% of snaps last year compared to Brent Selleck's 52%. I would expect that number the gap in those numbers to continue to grow. So again, I'm saying I like him, but he's currently going as the tight end 12, second pick of the 10th round. I like him at that price. And I do think looking at the tight ends in general, he's probably the last guy in that pool that I look at and say, like, I'm comfortable going into the season with him. The rest of the guys are definitely like risk type guys who, I may end up with because I just don't draft tight ends early most of the time. But I think Zach Ertz to me is a nice pick there.
Yeah, that's fair. I won't argue that value too hard because I would even honestly put him at the high end of like that tight end roulette pool. So it's not too much of a price certainly, and like you said, the upside is there. So definitely agree with that stance. I just can't do it.
That's fair. That's extremely fair. I understand completely. The defense. I don't want to start it. Do you?
No. I've been reading. I lost all my facts why, but I remember reading that there was some monumental reason that the Eagles defense could be pretty good this year. And I'm not sure why I'm forgetting it, but yeah, no, screw defenses. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, screw it. Who cares? No, defenses do matter sometimes, just not as much. So with that, I guess we'll wrap up with the Eagles, and we'll send you guys right into this interview that Shrek did with Bruce from our good old sponsor, NoHalftime. So enjoy, guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, so the interview you guys have been waiting for all podcast long. Joining me here, I have Bruce from NoHalftime.com. He is a co-founder of NoHalftime.com. And Bruce, it's great to finally get you on the air and have you here to talk some fantasy football and, of course, some No Halftime.
Nick, thanks for the invite to the show. It's great to be here.
Bruce, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, people have heard the promos already, NoHalftime.com. We love the app. We've been on there playing a little bit, and we've kind of talked you guys up throughout some of the podcasts so far. Tell us a little bit about first you and your fantasy experience, and then kind of where No Halftime came from, and about you guys a little bit because you are unique to the daily space.
Yeah, not a problem at all. So I've been playing fantasy sports for, I would say, the last 20 some odd years. I was playing fantasy sports back when guys were they were using pens and paper to tabulate who won for the week, primarily with just fantasy football. And I've been playing fantasy football forever. I love it. I love fantasy sports in general. And my love is basically it's the same love that the other co-founders have for fantasy sports. We absolutely love fantasy sports. And, for a long time we spent, just kind of betting against each other and challenging each other, based on our lineups. Like, hey, in addition to the whole head-to-head matchup, we would say, look, I think my quarterback is going to do better than your quarterback. Mm-hmm. And that lended itself to the natural start for us to think about creating No Halftime. We wanted to create an app that was just we wanted to simplify the fantasy experience, not necessarily replace the traditional, the ESPNs, the Yahoos,
Of course.
But we wanted something to kind of add to the fantasy experience, so that's kind of how No Halftime came about. Obviously we officially launched the app last October 19th. And it's been great so far. It's been a fun ride. It's a very unique proposition, as you know. No one is really doing what we're doing. It's a unique space that we're in. So far so good.
Awesome. Yeah, it's been really cool. We were really excited when we you guys have reached out and we kind of formed our partnership. The one-on-one fantasy matchups and the take on it is, it's quite frankly, it's awesome. And it's not just limited to one sport. And how some people they fall in love, and it can be a detriment in that season-long league where you're just like, I'm biased because I'm a Chiefs fan personally. So for me, it's like I always want to draft Chiefs, but outside Jamal Charles, like, who do you really trust in Kansas City? So,
I gotta get Alex Smith. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So now I can be like, all right, well, like Jamal Charles versus somebody else, and my love maybe isn't actually going to hurt me; it's going to help me.
Exactly. And the other thing that we looked at too was not only fantasy football, but the other sports. Like I tried to play fantasy baseball a long time ago and fantasy basketball, and it's just too much. I just couldn't do it. But I wanted to have a fantasy interest in the sport, so I could root and have something more vested. So when I watch the game, maybe there's something more that I might get out of the game. So No Halftime is perfect because you don't have to manage the team for the entire season. You can just pick a player, whether it's Alex Rodriguez versus David Ortiz or Mike Trout versus whoever. Boom, No Halftime, you can do it. You can create that challenge and put it out there for the world. And there is usually going to be someone else who believes that that other player, if it's not a lopsided challenge, that someone will take it. So.
Yeah, it's it's cool to see it come across the sports because we're right here, we're fantasy football, but we watched one of our other guys, Vinny Gonzalez, he challenged Nick Walsh on the air on one of the podcasts. He loves LeBron, and he doesn't love LeBron and the Cavs because of the Cavs. He loves LeBron because everyone hates listening to him cheer for LeBron. So our buddy Walsh, loves Curry, and he called him out on the podcast, and he's like, "You can't run from the king. Let's go. It's going to be LeBron versus Curry." And he's tried to play fantasy basketball season long, and he couldn't do it. So to see him jump right in and be willing to do it here on No Halftime and do that one-on-one and actually open back up to the possibility of fantasy basketball, I think it's amazing. We've kind of seen it firsthand.
Exactly. The funny thing about the app is that, we have so many users who are dedicated fantasy football, who are, dedicated basketball, but having the app, it's kind of opened them up to, like you said, different sports that they might not have even thought about, like golf or even hockey. Like I love the Rangers. I'm a New York guy, so I love all the New York teams. I'm a Giants, Giants, Knicks, Rangers, and Yankees.
Okay.
But, I don't follow every single game, so it's perfect to have No Halftime with it.
Yeah, it's an awesome app, and saying you're a Giants fan here, I mean, it's perfect. We're talking about the NFC East this week on the podcast. So actually, we just talked a little Giants. So on the podcast on Tuesday. So let's start with the Giants. You're a New York Giants fan. What do you expect here? Let me start with Eli, because we look at Eli, and let me ask you. This is a question we got from one of our listeners. Would you be okay if Eli, for a season-long league, was your starting fantasy QB? Would you feel comfortable with that?
Hell yes. Hell yeah. The thing about Eli Manning that people fail to realize is, given the only weapon that he had in his receiving core was ODB last year, and sparingly the tight ends, here and there, Will Tye, Larry Donnell. That's pretty much it. The run game was suspect. The receivers outside of ODB, he was basically a hodgepodge mix of guys.
Yep.
So taking all that into consideration, and the improvements, you got Sterling coming in.
Yep.
Everyone loves this kid. Everyone is raving, and he's going to get out there, and he's going to be a perfect fit for that offense. You look at skill, opportunity, and he fits both of those. And then the running game, I think, is going to be improved, because I think the Giants realized towards the end of last season that you got to have one guy that's got to get the reps, that's got to get into a rhythm. So I think they're gonna feed Rashad Jennings, and they're gonna feed him well, and that's just get the run game going. Set up the play action. Eli's always been great at the play action. There's also the offensive line should be improved also. People have been clamoring about the right side. No one really likes, Newhouse or John Jerry, but I think the starting right tackle is not yet on the team. So, there's talks that Eugene Monroe might come over.
Yep.
Guy from the Ravens that they cut.
Yeah.
And also you never know who else might shake out from, some other teams as they try to reduce their rosters, they go younger. So, so I think having Eli, he's my sleeper quarterback. So keep that between us.
Yeah. Well, just me, you, and the listeners here.
Yeah.
But, hey, as long as you keep all your friends off the podcast, they won't have to hear your sleeper.
No, they're going to hear it. So, I think Eli's value. I think you can get Eli, in the later rounds. You don't have to get him in the mid rounds. So that gives you the opportunity to not only go, zero running back early on, so you can get receiver, get some of those mid-tier running back, and then round your team out with Eli at the end and feel confident that he'll put up top 10 numbers for you. And that I stick and stand by that that Eli will be a good quarterback this year. So
yeah, we're with you. Our consensus from Tuesday's podcast was that, he is a bit, people are talking about him, but, we're big proponents of draft a QB late. You don't invest the early pick. And I think Eli is one of those perfect guys because we watched him perform really well at the end of the season. Yeah. Like you said, you add Sterling. I think they've got a nice options there. Odell's going to get his. Eli's looked really good. So I totally agree.
And also, if you can get 70% of Victor Cruz, the Victor Cruz that we remember, the salsa dancing, the salsa king, if you can get 70% of what he used to be, that's better than anything that they have outside of ODB and Sterling. There's no question.
Yeah, I agree. So, hey, we'll see. Hopefully things come through for you for the Giants. We are proud of our homerism here on the podcast. We all have our bias, and we love to see it come out in everybody else. But I agree, even statistically, even if you weren't a Giants fan, good things for Eli looking ahead.
Definitely.
We also talked about the Cowboys briefly, and I do want to ask you really quick about Ezekiel Elliott. Everyone is on the Elliott train. We watched McFadden. He played well behind that offensive line. It's arguably the best offensive line in the league. When you see him going right now in the early second round, he'll probably creep into that first round of fantasy drafts.
Yeah.
Is he worth it to you in the first round of fantasy drafts?
He might be a little bit too rich for my blood. I think the skill and the opportunity, two things that I always look at, is the skill there, is the opportunity there, and both of those things are there, but there's still something that's holding me back. And I think that the thing that's holding me back is that the Cowboys view Ezekiel as a long-term, running back for the team. That's not someone who you draft as a top 5 or top 10 pick and then, wear him out, within the first year. I really think that they're going to try to maximize his skill set. They're going to give Alfred Morris is there too. Don't forget about him. So I think that first round, no. To me, I would much rather put my money on one of those top receivers. Yeah. And if he's there in the second to third round, he probably won't be there in the third round. But if he's there in the second round, I'll consider getting him.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think first round is a little too rich for me. I've always, and for good or bad, I've always kind of tried to avoid risk. With the way the running backs panned out in the past, it's been kind of tough, but, I think there is a lot of risk. And I said, on the podcast on Tuesday that if he was there in the second round and I can grab him as my second back if I was late first round and got him on the wrap, or if I got an elite wide receiver and got him in the second, exactly. I would roll with it. But in the first, as my first pick in the draft, at least right now, again, it's June, just about July. It's early, but there's still too many question marks, I think, to feel good about it.
I agree. And the other thing I look at too is that, like you said, the value. There are going to be a lot of other running backs where their value took a hit last year because of circumstance or performance or injuries. Like C.J. Anderson, he's a guy that last year everyone had him in the first, second round, and then obviously he didn't perform. But I think one of the reasons why he didn't perform was because of injuries. The offensive line was terrible. Peyton Manning couldn't throw the ball, that far down the field to really save his life. He was throwing ducks. So when you're throwing ducks, the defense doesn't respect you. They start crowding the line, and then you got 10 men in the box. What are you going to do? So I think C.J. Anderson this year, I think they're going to feed him the rock. And I think that's a guy who, I would feel comfortable picking up if I had to, pick up go two wide receivers and then get a C.J. Anderson in the third round.
Yes, I agree. I think recency bias is definitely hitting him on the opposite side, where everyone is like, I can't touch him, and the value's there. I agree.
Yeah, even Jamal Charles. I think, again, he's getting up there in age, but I really believe that Jamal Charles is still a top running back in the NFL. I mean, there's going to be some competition there. I mean, they don't just bring back was it Ware? Is it
Ware and West? They both gave the same exact contracts too.
Exactly. You don't just bring those guys back to have them on the bench. But I believe that Jamal Charles can be a top back. I mean, he's going to catch passes out of the backfield.
Yes.
He's going to be there on third down. You can trust him in the red zone. So I think that the value for a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, you can get better value if you wait, and so it'll be interesting.
Yeah, my Chiefs fan bias and my fantasy bias combined there. Yeah, I agree on Charles. I think he can do it on 15 touches. He doesn't need the 20, so you give him to Ware and West. But I'll keep my bias at bay for the most part now.
Quick question for you. As a Chiefs fan, how do you think that defense is going to be this year?
They're gonna be good. I think last year, they started slow and then they came out really, really good. It's health dependent. I mean, D Ford's been banged up in training camp. You got Justin Houston's injury. So, I think it's early to call it as saying they're going to be good, but if they can get healthy throughout this offseason, I like them. They got Barry back. I mean, they kept a lot of those pieces. So I think they'll be a top 10 defense again, assuming health.
All right, cool.
For sure. So, Bruce, I really appreciate you jumping on. We talked a little fantasy football. We talked some NoHalftime.com. And I actually do want to announce here now, guys, coming next week on next week's podcast, we're going to be running a contest for you to challenge some of us on NoHalftime.com. And a few of our winners, we're going to give away some free merchandise too from the shop. So if you walk away with the win, you get the pride of the win and maybe some gear. So we'll have that coming to you guys next week. But for now, this was great, Bruce. We'll have you back as we get closer to the season.
Nick, thanks so much. It was good talking to you.
Bruce, take care.
All right.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening to that. That again was Bruce from No Halftime with Shrek, and we're gonna go ahead and sign off for tonight. But next week we'll be back with the NFC North. So keep an eye out. We'll be doing the same format with 2 podcasts a week, 2 teams per podcast, and also we're going to announce. Well, I guess I'm kind of announcing it now, but we'll have details on the Let's Talk Fantasy Football gear giveaway coming up. So we'll be giving away some stuff to a few lucky listeners out there. So you're going to want to make sure you're around for that because our T-shirts are sweet. Rogers, you got anything else for everyone tonight?
Yes. No, nothing really. Get Mockin. I'm going to say it every week until August.
Get Mockin. We should put that on a T-shirt too. But anyway, yeah. So thanks again for listening, guys. Keep an eye out next week for the NFC North, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.